You ever stop and really think about money? I mean, what actually gives it its value? We use it every single day, but what it is, fundamentally, is one of the biggest and most fascinating puzzles in our world. So let's dive in and try to figure out what's really going on.
Seriously, how is it possible that this little piece of paper can get you a whole cart full of food or a full tank of gas? It seems like a simple question, right? But the answer, well, it goes right to the very heart of how our entire society is built.
Because, let's be honest, at the end of the day, that's all it is. It's some ink on a special blend of paper. You can't eat it, you can't build a shelter with it. Unlike something like gold or silver, it has basically zero use on its own. Now, for centuries, money was backed by a real physical thing. But those days, they're long gone.
And here's where it gets really weird. Most of the money that you and I think we have, it isn't even physical. Something like 90% of it just exists as digital numbers on a bank's computer. So, wait a minute. If it's not backed by gold and most of it isn't even real, then where on earth does the value come from?
Okay, the first and maybe the most important piece of this whole puzzle is that money is basically a social contract. It's a collective agreement we all share.
I know that sounds almost too simple, but it's the absolute fundamental truth. The idea of money as this social construct is the foundation for everything. It works for one reason and one reason only, because we all believe it works.
You could almost call it a shared delusion, but it's an incredibly useful one. It's really just a system of trust. Think of it like a super advanced IOU note that lets us trade things with millions of people we will never, ever meet.
And you can see how this starts on a really small scale. Imagine somebody writes a personal IOU to buy a TV. If the person selling the TV trusts them, they can then take that same IOU and use it to buy groceries. Then the grocer can use it to pay a farmer, and all of a sudden, that personal IOU is acting like money, just circulating through the community based on pure trust. That's the core idea.
But of course, that kind of trust can be pretty fragile. It can't just be left to chance. It needs a really powerful anchor, and that is where the government steps in.
I mean, if it's all just a shared belief, what's to stop the whole thing from collapsing tomorrow? What makes the government's IOUs so much more special and trustworthy than one written by you or me?
The answer has a name. It's called fiat money. The word fiat is Latin, and it basically means let it be done or by decree. So fiat money has value simply because a government orders it to have value. They just declare it. There's a really important theory that explains how this works called chartalism. It argues that money is a creature of the law. The government doesn't just snap its fingers and say, this is valuable and hope for the best. No, it very cleverly creates a real, undeniable demand for it. And here's how they do it. It's a two-part trick. First, they declare it legal tender, which means it has to be accepted to pay off any debt. But the second part, this is the real genius move. The government demands that you pay your taxes in that specific currency. All of a sudden, everybody needs to get their hands on it. That creates a permanent, massive demand. You need it because they say you do.
Okay, so if the government can just create valuable money out of thin air, that leads to a pretty obvious question, right? Why not just make more?
Why not just fire up the printing presses, make everyone a millionaire, and solve poverty forever? Sounds great in theory, but there's a huge, huge reason we don't do that. It all comes down to this simple idea. If you flood the system with tons more money, but the amount of stuff you can buy, the goods, the services, stays the same, then each one of those dollars is just worth less. That's inflation. Your money just doesn't go as far.
The economist Milton Friedman famously nailed this concept. Now, people argue about a lot in economics, but the basic link between the supply of money and inflation over the long run is pretty solid. For something that value, it has to be scarce.
And managing that scarcity, well, that's the whole job of central banks. You can think of them as the engineers of the entire money machine. Their main task is to manage the money supply in this incredibly delicate balancing act, to keep it rare enough to be valuable, but not so rare that it chokes the economy. And if you want a perfect, kind of crazy example of how disconnected a currency's face value is from its physical cost, get this. In 2023, it cost the US government over 3 cents to make a single 1-cent penny. It literally costs more to make the coin than the coin is worth. That tells you everything you need to know. The value is purely an idea.
So, to really get a handle on our modern money, it helps to put it side by side with other systems of value. Let's compare gold, fiat money, and cryptocurrency. When you lay it out like this, the different foundations of value really pop. Gold's value is physical.
It's rare, it's tangible. Fiat money, the stuff we use every day, its value comes from trusting an institution, the government. And then there's crypto, where the value comes from trusting the technology, the code itself. Each one is a system of value, but they're all built on a completely different kind of faith.
So when you boil it all down, it all comes back to this one massive shift. We've moved from a system backed by shiny metal to a system backed by something much more abstract and, frankly, much more powerful: trust. Trust in each other and trust in the institutions that run the whole show.
And that leaves us with one final and absolutely critical question. If our entire global economy is running on a system of trust, who are the people and the institutions that get to control that trust? Who's really pulling the levers? Well, that's what we're going to find out next time.